Here is something about your own experience that should genuinely unsettle you the moment you start to examine it carefully. You feel time. Not measure it, not calculate it, not deduce it from the position of the sun, but feel it. Right now, sitting wherever you are sitting, you are aware of a flow. A sense of moments passing. A sense that the present is real in a way the past and future are not. A sense that something is happening, that time is moving, that you are being carried forward through some kind of medium that has direction and texture and rhythm. This feeling is so basic to your existence that you have probably never seriously questioned it. It feels like a fact about reality. It feels like the most obvious thing imaginable. Of course time flows. Of course the present is real. Of course there is a difference between yesterday and tomorrow. And yet, when you start to look at this feeling carefully, when you start to ask where it comes from and why it has the particular qualities it has, something strange begins to emerge. Time, as physics describes it, does not flow. The equations of physics, from Newton to Einstein to the deepest formulations of quantum mechanics, contain no variable for the passage of time as an experience. They describe how systems evolve along the time dimension, but they do not describe a flow. They do not describe a present that is special. They do not describe a now that is real in any way that other moments are not. The flow you feel, the sense of time passing, is not in the physics. It is in you. And here is the deeper question that almost no one asks. Why is it specifically here, on this planet, in this particular configuration of rotation and atmosphere and biology, that time feels the way it feels? Would time feel the same on Mars? Would it feel the same on Venus, where days last longer than years? Would it feel the same on a tidally locked world where the sun never moves in the sky? Would it feel the same on a planet around a different star, with different rhythms, different cycles, different gravitational and atmospheric conditions? The answer, when you start to work it out carefully, is genuinely strange. The feeling of time as a real flowing thing may not be a universal feature of consciousness. It may be a feature of being a particular kind of biological organism on a particular kind of planet under a particular set of conditions. And Earth, as it turns out, is uniquely configured to produce exactly that feeling. On other worlds, time might feel utterly different, or might not feel like anything at all in the way you currently experience it. Tonight, I want to walk you slowly and carefully through why this is true. From the rotation of Earth to the rhythms of biology to the deep physics of consciousness and time, we are going to discover that the felt reality of time is not a fact about time but a fact about the place you happen to live. If you are new here, welcome to Sundown Science. Hit subscribe, pour something warm, and get comfortable, because what we are about to walk through tonight will quietly change how you think about your own experience of being alive. Now, settle in and let's ease into this one slowly. There is a sensation that runs underneath every moment of your conscious life, so constant and so unobtrusive that you almost never notice it. It is the sensation of time passing. Not the abstract idea of time, not the clock on your wall, not the calendar on your phone, but the felt sense that something is happening, that moments are flowing into other moments, that you are being carried forward through a kind of stream you did not choose to enter and cannot step out of. This sensation is so basic to human experience that it feels less like a perception and more like a fact about reality itself. It feels like the way things just are. And because it feels that way, almost no one asks where it comes from or why it has the particular qualities it has. But the sensation is real, and it is specific, and it has features that can be described. The present moment, for instance, feels different from other moments. It feels actual, immediate, here. The past feels gone but accessible through memory. The future feels not yet, anticipated but not real. There is a clear asymmetry. The flow has a direction. It moves from past to future, never backward. The pace feels approximately steady, although it can stretch or compress depending on circumstances. Time spent waiting feels longer than time spent absorbed in something interesting. Time during emergencies can feel slowed almost to a stop. Time during sleep is, for most of us, simply absent, with the period between falling asleep and waking up feeling like a single jump rather than a duration. These features of the felt experience of time are so consistent across human beings that we treat them as universal, as facts about what time is. But here is what is strange. None of these features appears in the equations of physics. The equations describe how systems change with respect to a variable we call time, but the variable does not flow. It does not have a present that is special. It does not have a direction in any fundamental sense, except for the statistical asymmetry produced by entropy increase. The physics of time is, in a deep sense, mute on the question of why time feels the way it feels. The flow, the now, the asymmetry, the texture, all of these are properties of the experience, not of the underlying reality. The equations are silent on what we feel. This is not a new observation. Philosophers have been pointing it out for centuries. Saint Augustine famously wrote in the 4th century that he knew what time was when no one asked him, but when he tried to explain it, he could not. The sensation of time is immediate and obvious, but the explanation of the sensation is genuinely hard. Modern physics has only deepened the puzzle. Einstein's relativity told us that there is no universal present moment, that simultaneity is observer-dependent, that the apparent flow of time is, at the level of fundamental physics, an illusion produced by something other than the geometry of spacetime. And yet we feel the flow. We feel it constantly. We feel it so strongly that the physics seems wrong, even though the physics has been confirmed in every experiment ever performed. The resolution to this puzzle, as far as anyone has been able to work it out, is that the flow of time is a property of consciousness rather than of physics. It is something the brain produces, not something the universe contains. This sounds strange the first time you encounter it, but once you sit with it, it begins to make a certain kind of sense. The brain is constructing the experience of time, just as it is constructing every other aspect of conscious experience. The flow is a model, a representation, a way of organizing the firing of neurons into something that has the texture of duration. And like every model, the flow depends on the inputs the brain is receiving, on the rhythms and cycles that shape the neural processing, on the environmental conditions that determine what kinds of patterns the brain builds. And this brings us to the question that the rest of this video will explore. If the flow of time is constructed by the brain, then the construction depends on the conditions under which the brain operates. Those conditions are shaped, fundamentally, by the planet on which the brain evolved. The rotation of the Earth, the alternation of day and night, the seasons, the rhythms of weather and tides and biology, all of these have shaped the construction of time as we experience it. And on a different planet, with different conditions, the construction would be different. The felt reality of time, in other words, may be a feature of life on this particular world, not a universal feature of consciousness. The universe may contain regions, planets, perhaps eventually entire civilizations, where time does not feel the way it feels here. Where the experience is different. Where the flow has different qualities, or no qualities at all. Earth, in this picture, is not just a place where time happens. Earth is a place where time has been given its particular felt character by the conditions of the planet itself. Inside your body, right now, there are countless rhythms running. Some of them are obvious. Your heart beats roughly once per second. Your lungs fill and empty roughly 15 times per minute. Your eyes blink, your stomach contracts, your muscles twitch and relax. These are rhythms you can sometimes feel. But beneath these obvious rhythms, there are deeper ones, slower ones, rhythms that operate on timescales of hours and days and that you have no direct conscious access to. The most important of these is the circadian rhythm, the roughly 24-hour cycle that governs almost every biological process in your body. The circadian rhythm is not a metaphor. It is a physical mechanism, encoded in the molecular biology of your cells, regulated by a small cluster of neurons in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and synchronized to the external rotation of the Earth by signals from your eyes detecting the cycle of light and darkness. Almost every cell in your body contains a molecular clock that ticks on a roughly 24-hour cycle. The ticking is real. The mechanism involves specific proteins that are produced and degraded on a schedule, with feedback loops that maintain the rhythm. Your liver has a clock. Your kidneys have a clock. Your skin cells have clocks. The temperature of your body cycles through a daily rhythm, with a low point in the early morning hours and a peak in the late afternoon. Your alertness, your reaction times, your hormone levels, your hunger, your mood, all of these cycle through the day, driven by the cellular clocks ticking inside you. This rhythm is, in a deep sense, where your felt experience of time begins. Long before you are consciously aware of how long you have been awake, your body knows. Long before you remember when you last ate, your stomach is responding to the time of day. Long before you decide it is evening, your hormones have started shifting towards sleep. The conscious experience of time, the felt sense of duration, of moments accumulating, of the day unfolding, is built on top of these biological rhythms. The brain integrates the rhythms with sensory input and with memory to produce the felt sense of time. And the rhythms themselves are tuned, with extraordinary precision, to the rotation rate of the Earth. Why 24 hours? Why not 12, or 30, or 60? The answer is that life on Earth has evolved for billions of years under the rotation of this particular planet. The first single-celled organisms that developed circadian rhythms did so as an adaptation to the daily cycle of light and darkness. Organisms that could anticipate the dawn, that could prepare their photosynthetic machinery before the light arrived, that could position themselves correctly for the coming changes in temperature and food availability, had a survival advantage. Over hundreds of millions of years, these rhythms became deeply embedded in the molecular biology of life. By the time complex animals appeared, the circadian rhythm was already a foundational feature of cellular operation. Your body's 24-hour clock is not a recent adaptation. It is an inheritance from the first organisms that learned to live in time with this particular spinning planet. Now think about what this means. The circadian rhythm is a biological consequence of Earth's rotation rate. The brain's construction of the felt experience of time is built on top of the circadian rhythm. So the felt experience of time, in its most basic features, is calibrated to the rotation of Earth. 24 hours is not just a unit of measurement we have agreed upon. It is the natural rhythm of human biology. It is the period over which our cells reset, our brains cycle through their states, our experience of duration comes to feel like a complete day. The unit of time we call a day is not arbitrary. It is the fundamental unit of biological experience, and it exists because of the way Earth happens to spin. If Earth spun faster, with days that lasted only a few hours, our biology would have evolved differently. The rhythms would be shorter. The cycles would be tighter. The felt experience of duration, of how long a day is, of how a day feels, would be different. If Earth spun slower, with days lasting hundreds of hours, the rhythms would be slower, the cycles longer, and the felt experience of time would be different in the opposite direction. The fact that a day feels the way it feels, the fact that 24 hours has a particular texture in human experience, is not a fact about time. It is a fact about Earth. The planet has shaped the biology, and the biology has shaped the experience. And the chain runs all the way down to the felt sensation of moments passing. I want you to sit with this for a moment, because it is genuinely strange. The way time feels to you is not just a feature of being a conscious being. It is a feature of being a conscious being on Earth. And the specific texture of that feeling, the rhythms and cycles that give the day its shape, are not universal. They are local. They are calibrated to this place, this rotation rate, this distance from the sun. On a different world, the calibration would be different, and so would the feeling. There is a reason the circadian rhythm tracks the day-night cycle so precisely, and the reason has to do with light. Specifically, with the way light arrives at the surface of Earth in alternating periods of presence and absence, driven by the planet's rotation through space. Every 24 hours, the planet completes one rotation, and during that rotation, every point on the surface passes through a period of illumination and a period of darkness. This alternation is the most consistent and reliable environmental signal available to life. It has been happening, with extraordinary regularity, for the entire history of Earth's existence. Long before life appeared, the day-night cycle was running. Once life appeared, it adapted to the cycle. The cycle became the foundational rhythm of biological evolution. Light, for biological purposes, is not just a source of energy. It is information. The presence of light tells an organism that the sun is up, that photosynthesis is possible, that warmer temperatures are coming, that activity is favored over rest. The absence of light tells the opposite story. The transitions between light and darkness, the dawn and the dusk, are particularly information-rich moments. They are predictable. They are reliable. They are the cues that biological clocks use to synchronize themselves with the external world. Your eyes are wired to your circadian system in a specific way. The retinas of your eyes contain not just the rod and cone cells that produce vision but also a specialized class of cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells are not used for seeing. They are used for measuring the overall level of light in the environment, particularly the blue wavelengths that dominate the daytime sky. The signals from these cells travel along a pathway that bypasses the visual cortex and goes directly to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock in your hypothalamus. The clock uses these signals to keep itself synchronized to the external day-night cycle. In effect, the photons of sunlight entering your eyes are participating in the ongoing tuning of your internal sense of time. The light is not just illuminating the world for you. It is calibrating your experience of duration. This calibration is so important to human biology that disrupting it has serious consequences. People who work night shifts, who flip their schedules between day and night, who spend long periods in environments without natural light, experience significant disruptions in their circadian rhythms. The disruption is not just a matter of feeling tired. It affects metabolism, cardiovascular function, immune response, mood, cognitive performance. The body's expectation of when light should arrive, built into millions of years of evolution, is a deep and stubborn structure. Shifting it is hard. Maintaining a misaligned schedule produces measurable health consequences. The body wants to be in sync with the planet's rotation, and when it cannot be, it suffers. Now consider what this means for the felt experience of time. The brain is producing the experience of duration partly by integrating signals from the circadian system. The circadian system is being tuned by light arriving from the sky on a 24-hour cycle. The cycle exists because Earth rotates at a particular rate. The experience of time, as you actually feel it, is therefore connected through a chain of biological processes to the rotation rate of the planet. If you spent a long time in a room with no natural light and no clocks, your sense of time would begin to drift. Experiments have shown that people in such conditions develop slightly different daily cycles, with the body's internal clock running a little longer or shorter than 24 hours. The clock is not perfectly self-sustaining. It needs the external signal to stay tuned. Without that signal, the experience of time loses its anchor. The practical implication is that the felt experience of time is not generated entirely inside the head. It is produced by an interaction between the brain, the body, and the environmental rhythms of the planet. The planet's rotation provides a steady, reliable signal that shapes the temporal experience of every conscious organism on its surface. The signal is so deeply embedded in biology that it has become inseparable from consciousness itself. To be a human being having an experience is to be having that experience in time with Earth's rotation. The two are bound together so tightly that they cannot be cleanly separated. This is why time feels real on Earth. The rhythms are unambiguous. The cycles are reliable. The biology is tuned to receive the signal. The brain integrates the signal into the experience. And the result is a felt sense of duration that has a particular texture, a particular shape, a particular relationship to the natural environment. The realness of time, in this picture, is not a property of time itself. It is a property of the relationship between consciousness and a particular kind of environment. On Earth, that relationship is rich, consistent, and biologically reinforced. The result is a sense of time that feels solid, that feels like a fundamental feature of reality. But the solidity is, in a sense, an artifact of the perfect alignment between biology and environment that has been built up over billions of years of evolution. Now let us think about what would happen if we lived on a different planet. Start with Mars, because Mars is one of the most Earth-like worlds in the solar system, and it has been studied extensively, and the comparison to Earth is illuminating. Mars rotates on its axis once every 24 hours and 39 minutes. This is remarkably close to Earth's rotation period. A Martian day, called a sol, is just 39 minutes longer than an Earth day. You might think this small difference would mean that time on Mars would feel essentially the same as time on Earth. But the small difference, when carried through the biology, produces effects that are surprisingly large. People who work on Mars missions, the engineers and scientists who operate rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance, often live on Mars time during critical mission phases. Their schedules are shifted by 39 minutes each Earth day to keep them in sync with the Martian sol. Over the course of a few weeks, this means their schedules drift around the clock relative to the local Earth time. They wake up at strange hours. They sleep during the Earth day. They eat meals at times that feel wrong to their biology. And the results, consistently, are difficult. Living on Mars time is harder than living on Earth time, even for these well-trained and well-supported professionals. The body resists. The circadian rhythm, calibrated to 24 hours, struggles to adapt to a 24-hour and 39-minute cycle. People report sleep disturbances, cognitive impairment, mood changes, and a general sense of being out of sync with their own internal rhythms. 39 minutes, over the course of a few weeks, drifts the schedule around the clock. After a month, someone living on Mars time would be sleeping at the time they used to be awake. The biology, designed for 24 hours, cannot keep up with the slightly different rhythm. The mismatch accumulates. The body becomes increasingly disoriented, and the felt experience of time becomes correspondingly strange. Time on Mars, even on this small scale of difference, does not feel quite right. Now imagine actually living on Mars. Imagine being born there, growing up there, having a biology that has had no time to adapt to the slightly different day length. What would the felt experience of time be? The honest answer is that we do not fully know, but we can make some informed guesses based on what we know about circadian biology. If humans were transplanted to Mars and required to live on a Martian sol, the biology would slowly adapt over generations. The genetics of the circadian rhythm could shift. New variants of the clock genes could emerge that are tuned to 24 hours and 39 minutes rather than 24 hours. After enough generations, a Martian-adapted human population might have a felt experience of time that fits the Martian day naturally, that feels right in the way that an Earth day feels right to us. But until that adaptation happened, the experience would be one of subtle wrongness. The day would feel slightly long. The night would stretch a little too far. The rhythms would be just off. The felt sense of time, the texture of duration, would be a little out of tune. Time would feel real on Mars, in the sense that conscious beings would still experience flow and presentness, but the qualities of that flow would be different. The day would not have quite the same shape. The night would not have quite the same depth. The transitions would not feel quite the same. And these differences, accumulated over a lifetime, would produce a different felt relationship to time than humans on Earth experience. Mars also has another feature that affects the experience of time. The day-night cycle on Mars is similar to Earth's, but the seasons are very different. A Martian year is roughly 687 Earth days, almost twice as long as an Earth year. The seasons last twice as long as Earth seasons. A summer on Mars stretches across what we would experience as nearly 2 summers. A winter lasts equally long. The slow march of the seasons would shape the felt experience of time on a yearly scale in ways that humans have no analog for. The annual rhythm, which on Earth is so deeply woven into our culture and biology that we treat it as foundational, would be much slower. The sense of a year passing, of seasons cycling through, of birthdays accumulating, would have a different texture entirely. Time on Mars, in this sense, would feel slower on a yearly scale and almost the same on a daily scale. The mismatch between the two scales would produce a felt experience of time that did not match Earth in any simple way. Mars is at least Earth-like in its broad rhythms. The day is close to ours. The seasons exist, even if they are longer. The basic structure of time is recognizable. Now let us go to a planet where the basic structure breaks down entirely. Let us go to Venus. Venus rotates on its axis once every 243 Earth days. Venus orbits the Sun once every 225 Earth days. This means that on Venus, the day is longer than the year. A single rotation of the planet takes longer than a complete trip around the Sun. This is a fact about Venus's rotation that has no analog anywhere else in the inner solar system. And it produces, when you think about it carefully, an experience of time that would be deeply unfamiliar to anyone with Earth-like biology. If you stood on Venus, which you could not because the surface temperature is hot enough to melt lead and the atmospheric pressure would crush you instantly, but if you somehow could, you would experience a sun that moves across the sky with extraordinary slowness. The sun would rise in the west, because Venus rotates retrograde, which we discussed in detail in another video. It would creep across the sky over the course of weeks, never moving quickly, never giving any sense that the day was advancing in any normal way. It would set in the east, also slowly, also taking weeks. The night that followed would last another 2 months. And during one full Venusian year, you would experience this only twice. 2 days, 2 nights, in the time it takes Venus to complete one orbit around the Sun. Now imagine being a conscious being on this world. Imagine your biology had to adapt to this rhythm. What would your circadian system do? The simple answer is that no Earth-like circadian system could survive on Venus. The rhythm is too far from 24 hours. The cycle is too long. The biology that we have, calibrated to Earth's rotation, would not function. Some other biological system would have to evolve, one tuned to the slow rhythms of Venus rather than the rapid ones of Earth. What would such a biology feel like? Again, we cannot fully know, but we can speculate. A creature whose biology was tuned to 117 Earth day might experience the day not as a unit of biological time but as something more like a season. The day would be too long to be a single biological cycle. It would have to be subdivided into shorter rhythms, perhaps hours-long cycles of activity and rest, perhaps something else entirely. The transitions between day and night would not be daily events. They would be major changes in the environment, comparable to seasonal changes on Earth, lasting weeks each. The felt experience of time, in such a biology, would be utterly different from anything humans have experienced. The relationship to the year would also be different. A year on Venus, the time for the planet to orbit the Sun, is shorter than a day. So the year, which on Earth is a meaningful unit of biological experience, would on Venus be a subunit of the day. The annual cycle would happen multiple times within a single day. This is a configuration that has no Earth analog at all. There is no Earth experience comparable to having the annual cycle nested inside the daily cycle. The felt experience of such a configuration is, frankly, unimaginable to me. I cannot construct from my Earth-based intuitions what such a temporal experience would be like. And that, I think, is the point. Time, on Venus, would feel like nothing time has ever felt like to anyone living on Earth. This is the first hint at the deeper claim. Time does not feel real in the same way everywhere. The realness of time, the sense of flow, the texture of duration, depends on the rhythms available in the environment. On Earth, the rhythms are tuned to produce a particular kind of felt experience, one that we treat as the natural default. On Venus, the rhythms are utterly different, and any biology adapted to those rhythms would experience time in a way we have no good way to imagine. Time, on different worlds, would feel differently real, with the realness shaped by the local environmental conditions. There is no universal felt experience of time. There are only experiences shaped by the planets on which they occur. Even more extreme than Venus is the case of a tidally locked planet. A tidally locked planet is one whose rotation has been slowed by gravitational interaction with its star until it always shows the same face to the star. One side of the planet is permanently illuminated. The other side is permanently dark. There is no day-night cycle in the usual sense. There is just an eternal day on one hemisphere and an eternal night on the other. Tidally locked planets are not exotic. They are, in fact, probably common in the universe. Many of the planets we have discovered orbiting other stars are tidally locked, particularly those that orbit close to small cool stars called red dwarfs. Red dwarfs are the most common type of star in the galaxy. The habitable zones around red dwarfs, where temperatures might allow liquid water, are very close to the stars, close enough that planets in those zones would generally be tidally locked. So if life is going to exist on planets around red dwarfs, which is plausible given how many such stars there are, that life will exist on tidally locked worlds. What would time feel like on such a world? Consider the day side. The sun would sit at a fixed position in the sky. It would never rise, never set, never move. The light would be constant. The temperature, depending on atmospheric circulation, might also be relatively constant, although there could be local variations driven by winds and weather. The fundamental cycle that organizes time on Earth, the alternation of day and night, would simply not exist. There would be no dawn. There would be no dusk. There would be no biological signal for when to sleep and when to wake. The whole structure on which Earth-based circadian biology rests would be absent. A biology adapted to such a world would have to organize time in some other way. Perhaps it would use weather cycles. Perhaps it would use tidal cycles, if the planet had a moon. Perhaps it would use endogenous rhythms with no environmental synchronization, just internal biological clocks running on whatever schedule they happen to settle into. But none of these would produce the felt experience of time that humans have. There would be no day. There would be no night. There would be no experience of time being divided into the bright active period and the dark rest period that defines so much of human temporal awareness. Now consider the night side. The dark hemisphere would be in permanent darkness. The sky might have stars, depending on the planet's orientation in space. But there would be no sun, no daily cycle, no rhythm of light and darkness. A creature living on the night side would experience an eternal night. The felt experience of time would be deeply different from anything Earth-based. There would be no morning to anticipate. There would be no evening to mark the day's end. There would be only the slow grinding of internal rhythms against an unchanging external dark. I find myself struggling, again, to imagine what time would feel like in such a place. The Earth-based intuitions we have are so deeply tied to the day-night cycle that removing the cycle removes much of what gives time its felt structure. Time on a tidally locked planet would still flow, in some sense. Conscious beings would still experience moments. But the moments would not have the same texture. The flow would not have the same shape. The realness of time, the felt sense of being carried forward through a structured experience, would have to be produced by something other than the rhythms that produce it on Earth. And whatever that something was, it would produce a different kind of temporal experience, one that we cannot easily picture from where we sit. The point I want to make is not that time would not exist on such worlds. Time would exist. Physics would still operate. The equations would still describe the evolution of systems through time. The point is that the felt experience of time, the subjective sense of duration and flow and presentness, depends on the environmental rhythms that shape the consciousness experiencing it. Earth has a particular set of rhythms. Other worlds have other rhythms. And the felt experience of time, on each world, would be shaped by those rhythms into something specific to that world. There is no universal felt time. There are only local times, each shaped by its local environment. Beyond the daily cycle, there is another rhythm that shapes the felt experience of time on Earth. The seasons. Earth's axial tilt, the 23.5 degrees by which the planet's rotation axis is offset from the perpendicular to its orbital plane, produces a yearly cycle of changing temperatures, changing day lengths, changing weather patterns. The cycle has been running for the entire history of Earth, and life has adapted to it as deeply as it has adapted to the daily cycle. The seasons are not just weather. They are a fundamental rhythm of biological life on this planet. Plants flower in the spring, leaf out in the summer, drop their leaves in the autumn, sleep through the winter. Animals migrate, hibernate, breed, raise young, all on schedules tied to the seasons. Humans, despite our technological insulation from the natural world, still feel the seasons. We experience spring as a time of renewal, summer as a time of abundance, autumn as a time of preparation, winter as a time of withdrawal. These associations are not just cultural. They are tied to deep biological responses to the changing day length and the changing temperatures. Our hormones respond to the seasons. Our moods shift. Our energy levels adjust. The seasonal rhythm is woven through our biology in ways we are only beginning to understand. The felt experience of a year, on Earth, is shaped by this seasonal cycle. A year is not just 365 days. A year is a cycle of seasons, a passage through the yearly rhythm. We experience the year as having structure, as having phases, as having a shape. The structure is provided by the seasons. Without them, a year would just be a long stretch of days, undifferentiated, without any clear internal organization. With them, a year becomes a meaningful unit of biological and cultural experience. Now consider what this means for other worlds. A planet without significant axial tilt would not have seasons. Its weather and temperature might vary somewhat with distance from the equator, but the yearly cycle of seasonal change would be absent. Time on such a planet, on the yearly scale, would be undifferentiated. There would be no internal structure to the year. There would be no biological cycle to organize it. The felt experience of years passing would be different in kind, not just in degree, from the felt experience on Earth. Mars has axial tilt and therefore seasons, but as I mentioned, the Martian year is much longer than the Earth year, and the seasons are correspondingly longer. The felt experience of seasons on Mars, if humans lived there long enough to develop one, would be different from Earth's. Each season would last roughly 6 Earth months. The summer would stretch over what we would experience as half a year. The transitions would be slow. The yearly rhythm would have a different pace, a different feel. Living on Mars would mean experiencing time at a different yearly scale than Earth provides. Some planets have extreme axial tilts that produce wild seasonal variations. Uranus has an axial tilt of 98 degrees, which means it essentially rotates on its side. Each pole of Uranus spends decades in continuous sunlight and decades in continuous darkness, with the rest of the planet experiencing extreme seasonal swings. If life existed on a planet with such a tilt, the seasons would dominate the experience of time in a way that Earth seasons do not. The yearly cycle would be the most important rhythm, more important even than the daily cycle. Life would have to adapt to this dominant seasonal rhythm in ways we have no Earth analog for. Other planets have orbits that are highly eccentric, meaning they are stretched ovals rather than circles. On such planets, the distance from the Sun varies dramatically over the course of a year, producing extreme temperature swings unrelated to axial tilt. The seasons on these planets would be different in kind from Earth seasons. They would be dominated by the orbital cycle rather than by the axial tilt. The felt experience of time would be shaped by these orbital rhythms in ways unfamiliar to Earth biology. The general point is that the yearly cycle, like the daily cycle, is shaped by the specific orbital and rotational properties of a planet. Different planets have different yearly cycles, and life on different planets would experience time on the yearly scale differently. The felt sense of a year, of how long a year is, of what a year contains, would differ from world to world. Earth's particular configuration produces a particular felt experience of yearly time. That experience is not universal. It is local to this planet. There is yet another rhythm on Earth that shapes the felt experience of time, although it is less obvious to most of us. The tides. The Moon's gravitational pull on Earth's oceans produces a rhythm of high and low tides that cycles roughly every 12.5 hours, with some variation depending on location and lunar phase. For humans living far from the sea, the tides are not part of daily experience. But for marine organisms and for coastal life, the tidal rhythm is fundamental. Many marine creatures have biological clocks tuned to the tides as well as to the day-night cycle. They experience time as a complex interplay of multiple rhythms, with the daily cycle and the tidal cycle interacting in ways that shape their behavior and physiology. Even for land-dwelling humans, the tidal rhythm has subtle effects. The Moon's gravitational pull affects not just the oceans but everything on Earth, including our bodies. The effects are tiny, but they exist. Some studies have suggested that human biology has subtle responses to the lunar cycle, although the evidence is not as strong as for the circadian rhythm. The Moon, in any case, is part of the rhythmic environment in which Earth life has evolved. It contributes to the temporal structure that shapes biological experience. If Earth had no moon, the tidal cycle would still exist due to the Sun's gravity, but it would be much weaker. Marine biology would be different. Coastal ecosystems would be different. The temporal rhythms available to life would be subtly different. The felt experience of time, particularly for organisms tuned to the tides, would be shaped by a different set of cycles. And the night sky would be empty of the most prominent feature most humans see when they look up. The sky itself would feel different. If Earth had 2 moons, or 3, or a complicated system of moons like Jupiter's, the tidal patterns would be more complex. There would be multiple cycles overlapping, producing rhythms with longer periods of maximum and minimum tidal stress. Life adapted to such a configuration would experience time as a more complex set of nested rhythms than Earth life does. The felt experience of time would have additional layers, additional textures, that Earth life lacks. These are the kinds of considerations that have to be added to any picture of how time feels on different worlds. The temporal experience is shaped not just by the planet's own rotation and orbit, but by its system of moons and other companions, by the rhythms those companions produce in the planet's environment, by the cumulative effect of multiple overlapping cycles. Every world has its own rhythmic signature. Every world produces its own kind of temporal experience for whatever consciousness inhabits it. We have been talking a lot about the rhythms of the environment and how they shape biology. Now I want to talk about the brain itself, because the brain is where the felt experience of time actually gets constructed, and the construction process is genuinely strange when you look at it carefully. The brain does not have a simple time sensor. There is no organ that measures time the way the eye measures light or the ear measures sound. Instead, the brain produces the experience of time through a complex set of processes that involve many different regions and mechanisms. Some of these processes track very short intervals, milliseconds to seconds. Others track longer intervals, minutes to hours. Still others track very long intervals, days to seasons to years. The various time-tracking systems use different neural mechanisms and operate on different scales. The unified felt experience of time is produced by the brain integrating all of these into a single coherent representation. For very short intervals, the brain seems to use the dynamics of neural activity itself. The way patterns of neural firing unfold over time produces a sense of duration on the timescale of seconds. For longer intervals, the brain uses memory and prediction. By comparing the current state of the world to remembered states from earlier moments, and by predicting future states based on patterns, the brain constructs a sense of how much time has passed and how much is still to come. The felt experience of time is, in this picture, less like a measurement and more like an inference, a construction the brain assembles from many different sources. This means the felt experience of time is in principle malleable. Different conditions can produce different temporal experiences. We know this from many examples. Time slows during emergencies, when the brain is processing more information per unit of clock time and producing a felt experience of stretched duration. Time accelerates during periods of monotony, when there is little new information for the brain to process and the felt experience compresses. Time during sleep is largely absent, with hours passing in what feels like a moment. Time under the influence of certain drugs can become dramatically distorted, with seconds feeling like minutes or hours. The fact that the felt experience of time is constructed rather than measured has profound implications. It means that the experience is in principle different from the underlying physics. The physics says time advances at a constant rate, modulated only by relativistic effects that are negligible in everyday life. The experience says time can stretch and compress, depending on circumstances. Both are true, in their own domains. The physics describes the objective evolution of systems. The experience describes the subjective felt sense of duration. These are different things. Now, the construction process that the brain uses to produce the experience of time depends on the inputs the brain receives. The inputs include sensory information from the environment, signals from the circadian system, signals from the body's other internal clocks, and internal patterns of neural activity. All of these contribute to the construction. Change the inputs, and you change the construction. Change the rhythms in the environment, and you change the felt experience of time. This is the deep mechanism behind the claim that time feels different on different worlds. The brain's construction of the felt experience of time depends on the environmental rhythms it is processing. Those rhythms differ from world to world. Therefore, the constructed experience differs from world to world. The felt reality of time is a product of the interaction between the brain and the environment is the planet on which the brain happens to exist. Different planets, different environments, different felt times. There is one more piece of the puzzle that I want to add before bringing everything together, because it concerns one of the most peculiar features of the felt experience of time. The sense of the present moment. Right now, you feel that there is a present moment. You feel that this instant, the one you are experiencing as you read or listen to these words, is somehow special. It is more real than the past. It is more real than the future. It is the now, the actual moment of your life. And yet, when you try to pin down exactly what the present moment is, it slips away. By the time you have noticed it, it is already gone. By the time you have started to think about it, it has passed. The present moment is, in some sense, always just out of reach, even though it is also always exactly where you are. This puzzle has been recognized by philosophers for a long time. The present moment, on any close examination, dissolves. It is not a duration, because any duration contains earlier and later sub-moments, and only one of those can be the present. It is not an instant, because instants are mathematical abstractions with zero duration, and conscious experience does not happen in zero time. The present moment is, in a sense, a felt sensation rather than a measurable phenomenon. It is the sense of being here, now, alive in the actual unfolding of time. But what produces this sense? Modern neuroscience and philosophy of mind suggest that the felt present moment is itself a construction, just like the felt flow of time. The brain takes in information from the senses, processes it, integrates it, and produces a unified experience that includes the sense of a present moment. The processing takes time, on the order of tens to hundreds of milliseconds. By the time the experience has been assembled, the events that produced it have already passed. The present moment, as you experience it, is therefore slightly delayed relative to the actual events of the world. The brain compensates for this delay by constructing a present that feels immediate, even though it is technically a slightly outdated representation. The width of the felt present moment, in human experience, is something like 2 to 3 seconds. This is the duration over which experience feels unified, where the moment now encompasses a small window of recent events that are still present rather than past. After 2 or 3 seconds, events fade into the past and are accessed through memory rather than direct experience. This window, called the specious present in some philosophical traditions, is a feature of how human consciousness is constructed. It is not a feature of time itself. Time does not have a special interval of 2 to 3 seconds where reality is more real. Time, in the physics sense, has no special intervals. The 2 to 3 seconds is a property of human cognition. Now imagine consciousness with a different specious present. Imagine a creature whose felt present moment lasted only milliseconds, or one whose felt present extended over hours. The experience of time would be radically different. A creature with a millisecond present would experience the world as a flickering succession of nearly disconnected moments, with no sense of unfolding events, no sense of continuity within experience. A creature with an hour-long present would experience whole conversations as single moments, whole afternoons as unified instants, the entire structure of temporal experience changing dramatically. We have no direct evidence of what determines the width of the specious present, but it seems likely to depend on the timescales of neural processing, which in turn depend on the size and structure of the brain, which in turn depend on the biology, which in turn depends on the planet on which the biology evolved. So even the felt width of the present moment, the size of the now that we experience as immediate reality, may be specific to the conditions of life on Earth. On other worlds, with other biologies, the present might feel different. Wider, narrower, structured differently. The realness of the present moment, in this picture, is yet another property of the felt experience of time that depends on the specific conditions of the consciousness experiencing it. There is a feature of the felt experience of time that we have been discussing implicitly but not explicitly. The asymmetry between past and future. In experience, the past is something you remember. The future is something you anticipate. These are very different mental processes, and they produce very different felt experiences. Memory has a particular quality. It feels like accessing something that already happened, something fixed, something real but no longer present. Anticipation has a different quality. It feels like imagining something that has not yet happened, something open, something not yet real. This asymmetry is so basic to experience that it feels like a fact about time itself. The past is fixed, the future is open. The past has happened, the future has not. The arrow of time runs from past to future, never the other way. And the felt experience of time reflects this asymmetry at every level, from the broad structure of life narratives to the moment-to-moment unfolding of immediate experience. But here is the strange thing. The fundamental laws of physics do not have this asymmetry. The equations of mechanics and electromagnetism work equally well running forward or backward in time. The microscopic processes of physics are time-symmetric. The asymmetry we experience is not a feature of these microscopic laws. It comes from somewhere else. It comes, primarily, from the second law of thermodynamics, which says that the total entropy of an isolated system tends to increase over time. Entropy increase produces the macroscopic asymmetry we associate with the arrow of time. It is why broken glasses do not reassemble. It is why we remember the past and not the future. It is why the universe has a directional history. The brain, in producing the felt experience of memory and anticipation, is using the entropy gradient of the universe as a substrate. Memory works because past states leave traces in the present, traces that can be accessed and reconstructed. Anticipation works because the brain can extrapolate from current trends, predicting future states based on patterns observed so far. Both of these processes depend on the asymmetry between past and future, on the fact that information flows from past to future in a particular way. The felt asymmetry of time is therefore tied to the deep thermodynamic structure of the universe. This is happening, of course, on every planet. Every world in the universe is subject to the second law of thermodynamics. Every consciousness anywhere in the universe is, in some sense, embedded in the entropy gradient that produces the arrow of time. So this aspect of temporal experience is more universal than the others we have discussed. The felt asymmetry of past and future would exist on Mars, on Venus, on tidally locked worlds, on any world where consciousness is possible. But the specific texture of the asymmetry, the way memory and anticipation feel, may still depend on the local environment. On Earth, memories are tied to specific times of day, specific seasons, specific weather conditions. We remember things in temporal context. We remember the summer we were 10, the rainy afternoon we had a particular conversation, the winter morning when something important happened. The texture of memory is shaped by the rhythms of Earth. On a tidally locked world, with no day-night cycle, memories would have a different texture. Without the contextual cues of changing light, changing seasons, changing weather, the felt quality of remembering would be different. Memories would still exist. The asymmetry between past and future would still hold. But the experience of memory, the felt sense of accessing something earlier in time, would have a different shape. The same is true for anticipation. On Earth, we anticipate future events with the help of regular cycles. We know the sun will rise tomorrow. We know summer will come after winter. These regularities give anticipation a particular structure. They make the future feel predictable in certain ways and open in others. On a different world, with different regularities or fewer of them, anticipation would have a different felt quality. The future would be predictable in different ways, open in different ways, structured differently. The felt sense of looking forward would be a different kind of sensation. So the felt asymmetry of time, while present in some form on every world, takes different specific forms in different conditions. The realness of the past as something you can access through memory, the realness of the future as something you can anticipate, both depend partly on the local environmental rhythms that give these mental processes their particular textures. Earth's rhythms produce one kind of textured memory and anticipation. Other worlds would produce others. The realness of time, in all its dimensions, is shaped by where you happen to be. Beyond biology and physics, there is yet another layer that shapes the felt experience of time on Earth. Culture. Human beings have developed, over thousands of years, an enormous infrastructure of clocks, calendars, schedules, traditions, and practices that organize collective experience of time. The week, with its 7 days, is a cultural construct. The month, in most modern calendars, is roughly tied to the lunar cycle but not exactly. The year, as we observe it, with January starting at a particular point in Earth's orbit, is a historical convention. Holidays mark particular dates. Workdays alternate with weekends. Annual cycles of school years, fiscal years, agricultural seasons all impose patterns on the experience of time. These cultural rhythms interact with biological rhythms to produce the integrated experience of time that humans actually have. A person living a modern life experiences time as shaped by Monday through Friday, by the start of the school year, by holiday seasons, by the rhythms of professional and social life. These are not biological. They are cultural. But they have become so deeply embedded in modern human experience that they shape the felt sense of time on a level comparable to the biological rhythms. This adds another dimension to the question of how time feels. Even on Earth, time feels different to people in different cultures, in different historical periods, in different lifestyles. A subsistence farmer experiences time through agricultural cycles. An office worker experiences time through workweeks and weekends. A nomadic herder experiences time through the movements of animals and the changes of seasons. Each of these is a felt experience of time on Earth, but each has its particular structure and texture shaped by the cultural patterns of life. If humans were to colonize another planet, they would bring their cultural rhythms with them, but those rhythms would have to adapt to the local environmental conditions. On Mars, the cultural week could be retained in some form, but the daily and yearly cycles would be Martian. On a tidally locked world, the very concept of a day would have to be reimagined. Humans would invent new cultural patterns to organize collective time on these new worlds, and those patterns would shape the felt experience of time in ways specific to each world. There is no reason to think that the cultural rhythms developed on Earth would be optimal or even comfortable on other worlds. They are, in essence, adaptations to Earth conditions. On other planets, new cultural rhythms would have to develop, new patterns of collective time, new ways of structuring life. The felt experience of time, even within human civilizations on other worlds, would diverge from the Earth-based experience over generations. Time on Mars, in a few centuries of human habitation, would feel different from time on Earth, partly for biological reasons and partly for cultural ones. This is yet another way in which the felt reality of time depends on local conditions. The cultural infrastructure that supports our experience of time on Earth has been built up over thousands of years specifically for Earth's conditions. Transplanting it to other worlds would involve modification, adaptation, and eventual divergence. The felt experience of time would change as the cultural rhythms changed. There would be no single human experience of time across the cosmos. There would be local experiences, each shaped by the local conditions. So far, we have been discussing the felt experience of time as something that varies with environmental conditions. But there is a deeper question that we should not avoid. Why is there a felt experience of time at all? Why is consciousness embedded in time in the way it is? Why does it feel like anything to exist in time? This is connected to what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem is the question of why physical processes produce subjective experience. Why is the firing of neurons accompanied by the felt sense of being someone, of having an inner life, of experiencing the world? The physical processes themselves can be described in detail. The neural mechanisms can be mapped. But the felt quality of experience, the something it is like to be of consciousness, remains genuinely mysterious. We do not know why physical processes generate subjective experience, and we do not know what makes some physical processes subjectively experienced while others are not. Time, as a felt experience, is one specific aspect of this larger puzzle. The felt flow of time, the sense of moments passing, the asymmetry between past and future, these are all aspects of subjective experience. They are part of what makes consciousness feel like consciousness. And just as we do not fully understand why consciousness exists at all, we do not fully understand why time is experienced in the particular way it is. We can describe the neural correlates of temporal experience. We can characterize the brain mechanisms involved. But the felt quality of time, the realness of the present moment, the texture of duration, these remain features of subjective experience that are difficult to reduce to physical description. What this means for our central question is that the felt reality of time is not just shaped by the planet on which consciousness exists. It is also shaped by what consciousness fundamentally is, which we do not fully understand. The various aspects of temporal experience that we have been discussing, the daily rhythms, the seasonal cycles, the present moment, the asymmetry of past and future, all of these are constructions of conscious minds. The constructions depend on the environment, but they also depend on the deeper nature of consciousness itself. And consciousness, at its deepest level, remains one of the great unsolved mysteries. Some philosophers have suggested that consciousness might be more universal than we usually think, that some form of subjective experience might be present in any sufficiently complex information processing system. If this is true, then conscious experience exists wherever there are appropriately complex systems, including possibly throughout the universe in many forms. Each of these forms would have its own kind of temporal experience, shaped by its own information processing structure and its own environmental conditions. The variety of conscious temporal experiences in the universe, on this view, could be vast. Other philosophers have suggested that consciousness is specific to certain kinds of biological systems, that it requires the particular kind of integration found in complex animal nervous systems. On this view, consciousness is rarer, and the variety of temporal experiences is more constrained. But even within this view, the experiences would vary depending on the specific biology and environment of each conscious system. Earth life, with its particular biological and environmental rhythms, would produce one family of temporal experiences. Life on other worlds, if it existed, would produce others. The universe would still contain a diversity of felt times, even if conscious life itself was rare. For the purposes of our question, the key point is this. The felt reality of time is shaped both by the structure of consciousness, which we do not fully understand, and by the environmental rhythms that consciousness is embedded in, which we understand better. On Earth, the rhythms are particularly rich, particularly stable, particularly aligned with biology. The result is a felt experience of time that has the particular qualities we know. On other worlds, the rhythms would be different, and the experience of time would be correspondingly different. The realness of time, in its full felt glory, is a specifically Earth-based experience, not because Earth is special metaphysically but because the conditions on Earth happen to produce this particular kind of temporal experience. I want to take a step back and look at this from a cosmic perspective. We have been discussing why time feels real on Earth in particular. But we should also note something important. On the largest scales, the universe does not have a felt experience of time at all. The universe, as a physical system, just exists. It has a space-time structure. It has matter and energy distributed through that structure. It has laws of physics governing the evolution of the matter and energy. But there is no felt experience anywhere in this picture, except in the localized regions where consciousness happens. In Einstein's relativity, we already noted that there is no universal present moment. Different observers in different states of motion will disagree about which events are simultaneous. The block universe view of relativity treats all events, past and future, as equally real, with no special status for any particular moment. From this cosmic perspective, the felt flow of time is not a feature of reality but a feature of the localized perspectives of conscious beings within reality. This is, in some ways, the most striking thing about the felt experience of time. It exists only in places where there are conscious beings to feel it. The rest of the universe just is. Stars burn, planets orbit, galaxies rotate, all without any felt experience accompanying them. The universe is mostly mute in terms of subjective experience. Only in the small pockets where consciousness has emerged is there a felt sense of time, and even there, the felt experience differs from place to place based on local conditions. Earth, then, is a place in the universe where one particular kind of felt time is produced. There may be other places, around other stars, where other kinds of felt time are produced by other conscious beings. We do not know how common this is. We do not know whether life and consciousness are rare or common in the universe. But what we can say is that whatever felt experiences of time exist in the universe, they are local, they are shaped by their environments, and they are not universal features of reality. They are properties of specific conscious systems in specific contexts. The felt reality of time, in this cosmic perspective, is a kind of local achievement. It is something that emerges in places where the right conditions are met. The right conditions, in our case, include a stable rotating planet with a regular day-night cycle, a moderate axial tilt producing seasons, a moon producing tides, a biology that has evolved to track these rhythms, and a cultural infrastructure that has developed over thousands of years to organize collective experience. Take away any of these, and the felt experience of time changes. Add other elements, and it changes differently. The felt time we know on Earth is the result of a particular set of conditions, and those conditions are not duplicated elsewhere in the solar system, and may or may not be duplicated elsewhere in the universe. When we ask why time feels real on Earth, we are really asking why this particular set of conditions has produced this particular kind of temporal experience. And the answer is that the conditions have shaped the biology, which has shaped the brain, which has shaped the experience. The chain runs from astronomy to biology to neuroscience to phenomenology, and at every step the local conditions of Earth have left their imprint. By the time we reach the felt experience of time as a flowing, real, present moment having stream, we are looking at something deeply specific to this planet. If the felt experience of time depends so strongly on local conditions, then any consciousness that exists elsewhere in the universe will have a different felt experience. This has implications for thinking about extraterrestrial life, if it exists, and for thinking about the future of human consciousness as we expand into space. For extraterrestrial life, the implication is that we should not expect alien consciousness to experience time the way we do. If there are conscious beings on a tidally locked planet around a red dwarf star, their experience of time would be radically different from ours. They would not have day-night cycles in the way we do. They would not have seasons in the way we do. Their biological and cognitive architectures would be tuned to different rhythms, possibly rhythms that we cannot easily imagine. Communication with such beings, if it ever became possible, might involve negotiating fundamentally different temporal experiences. They might think on different scales. They might experience the present moment differently. They might have entirely different relationships to past and future. For human consciousness expanding into space, the implication is that we will, over time, develop different experiences of time on different worlds. A Mars colony, if it persists for centuries, will develop a Martian experience of time, shaped by the longer year, the slightly different day, the different gravitational environment, the different culture that emerges. People raised on Mars will have a different felt sense of time than people raised on Earth. The differences may be subtle at first, but over many generations, they could become substantial. The descendants of Earth humans on Mars, in this picture, would slowly develop into a population with a different temporal phenomenology than their ancestors. The same would be true for any other space habitat. Asteroid colonies, with no day-night cycle and no gravity to speak of, would produce a different temporal experience again. Generation ships traveling between the stars, on journeys lasting centuries, would have to develop their own internal rhythms, their own ways of organizing time that work in the absence of any planetary surface. The felt experience of time on such a ship would be shaped by the artificial rhythms imposed by the ship's design and culture, not by any natural cycle. Over many generations, the people on such a ship would develop a temporal experience entirely divorced from the planetary rhythms that shaped Earth life. This means that the question of how time feels is not just an interesting philosophical puzzle. It is a practical issue for the future of conscious life in the universe. As consciousness spreads beyond Earth, in whatever forms that takes, the felt experience of time will diversify. There will be no single human temporal experience anymore. There will be Earth time, Mars time, asteroid time, ship time, and many others. Each will be shaped by its local conditions. Each will feel real, in its own way, to the conscious beings experiencing it. But the realness will be local, contingent, plural. We may eventually need a new vocabulary to describe these different temporal experiences. We may need new philosophical frameworks to think about consciousness in environments very different from Earth's. We may need to recognize, more deeply than we do now, that the felt experience of time is not a universal feature of conscious life but a local feature of life in particular environments. And recognizing this might change how we think about our own experience of time, here on Earth, right now. It might make us more aware that what we are experiencing is not the way time has to feel, but the way it feels to us, given where we are. So now we are ready to answer the central question. Why is Earth the only planet where time feels real? The answer, as we have built it up over the course of this discussion, is something like this. Time feels real on Earth because Earth provides a particularly rich, stable, biologically aligned set of rhythms that the human brain integrates into a felt experience of flowing temporal reality. The day-night cycle is stable, regular, and tied to a rotation rate that matches the inherited circadian biology of life. The seasons are pronounced, consistent, and tied to an axial tilt that produces meaningful annual cycles. The tides are present, contributing additional rhythms to the environment. The cultural infrastructure has developed over thousands of years to support collective temporal experience. All of these rhythms align with each other and with the biology of conscious beings who have evolved here. The result is a temporal experience that feels solid, structured, real. On other planets, this alignment does not exist. On Mars, the day is close enough to be familiar but different enough to disrupt biology. On Venus, the rhythms are entirely alien to Earth biology, with days longer than years. On tidally locked planets, the day-night cycle does not exist at all. On planets without significant axial tilt, seasons are absent. On worlds with very different orbital and rotational properties, the available rhythms produce different felt experiences of time. None of these would be the time that we feel on Earth. None of them would feel real in the same way. This does not mean that time would not exist on these other worlds. Time exists in the physics sense everywhere. The equations of physics still describe the evolution of systems through time on every world. But the felt experience of time, the subjective sense of flowing duration and present moment realness, is specific to the conditions that produce it. Earth produces a particular kind of felt time. Other worlds would produce other kinds. Each would feel real to the conscious beings on it, in their own way. But the particular felt realness we know, here on Earth, is not portable. It belongs to this planet, to this biology, to this particular alignment of rhythms. There is something humbling about this. The felt experience of time, which is one of the most basic features of conscious life, turns out to be a local product. It is not a universal property of consciousness. It is an Earth-specific phenomenon, shaped by the unique conditions of this world. We have been treating our temporal experience as if it were the way time is. It turns out it is just the way time feels here. And there is also something liberating about this. If the felt experience of time is shaped by local conditions, then it is not fixed. It is not the only way time could feel. There are other possibilities, other configurations, other felt times waiting to be discovered or produced. The future of conscious life, if it spreads through the cosmos, will involve a diversification of temporal experiences. The cosmos will become richer in this sense, with multiple kinds of felt time existing in multiple places, each shaped by its local conditions. The Earth-based felt experience of time will become one entry in a larger catalog of temporal phenomenologies. It will remain real, for those of us who live here. But it will no longer be the only kind of temporal realness. It will be one among many. As we approach the end of this discussion, I want to return to something more personal. The fact that you, right now, are experiencing time in the particular way that you are. The fact that the present moment feels real to you. The fact that the day has a particular shape, the year has a particular structure, your life has a particular felt unfolding through time. All of this is, in some sense, a privilege of being here. Of being on Earth. Of being a creature whose biology has been tuned, over billions of years, to the specific rhythms of this planet. Most of the universe does not feel time this way. Most of space is empty, silent, without any consciousness to feel anything. The stars burn without any subjective experience accompanying them. The galaxies rotate without any felt sense of duration. The vast majority of reality is, in a deep sense, a temporal desert, without any felt time in it at all. The pockets where consciousness exists are rare, scattered, possibly very few. And within those pockets, the felt experience of time depends on the local conditions, which vary. Earth is one of these pockets. It is a place where consciousness has emerged and where the local conditions support a particularly rich felt experience of time. We do not know how special this is. We do not know how many other pockets exist, or what felt times are produced in those pockets, or whether our particular Earth-based felt time is common or rare among possible felt times. We know only that we have it, here, now, and that it is the result of a particular alignment of conditions that exists on this planet. There is a way of seeing this that I find genuinely moving. The felt experience of time on Earth is, in some sense, an achievement of the universe. It is the result of stars producing the elements, planets forming, life emerging, biology evolving over billions of years to track environmental rhythms, brains developing the capacity to integrate those rhythms into conscious experience, cultures developing to enrich and structure that experience further. Every step in this chain is necessary for the felt time we have. Every step has happened, somehow, here. And the result is that you, right now, are experiencing time in a way that almost certainly does not exist anywhere else in this particular form, even if other felt times exist elsewhere. The realness of time, then, is not just a fact about your experience. It is a fact about your relationship to a very specific place in the universe. It is a fact about how a particular planet has shaped a particular kind of consciousness over a very long time. The next time you feel the present moment, the next time you sense the day unfolding, the next time you experience a season changing, I want you to remember that this feeling is local. It is yours because you are here. It is yours because the planet you live on has been spinning at this particular rate, orbiting at this particular distance, tilting at this particular angle, for billions of years, producing the rhythms that have shaped your biology and your experience. You are not just experiencing time. You are experiencing Earth time. The felt reality of time, for you, is the felt reality of being a conscious being on this particular world, integrated into the rhythms of this particular environment, raised within the cultural infrastructure of this particular civilization. Take any of these away, and the experience would change. Move you to another world, and the experience would change. The realness is not in the time. The realness is in the relationship between you and this place. So let us return to the question we started with. Why is Earth the only planet where time feels real? The answer, as we have built it up, is that Earth is the only place we know of where the conditions support the specific kind of felt temporal experience we have. The rotation rate, the axial tilt, the moon, the biology, the cultural infrastructure, all of these align to produce a particularly rich and stable felt experience of time. On other worlds in our solar system, the conditions are different, and the felt experience of time, if conscious beings existed there, would be correspondingly different. This does not mean Earth is metaphysically special. It does not mean time is somehow more real here than elsewhere. It means only that the felt realness of time, the subjective experience of flow and presence and duration, is a local phenomenon shaped by local conditions. Earth happens to have the conditions that produce the felt time we know. Other places have other conditions and would produce other felt times. The universe contains, in principle, many possible felt times, each shaped by its local environment. Earth time is one of them. It is the one we know best, because it is the one we live inside. If we eventually expand into the cosmos, if humans live for many generations on other worlds, we will discover this directly. We will find that time on Mars feels different from time on Earth. We will find that time on tidally locked exoplanets feels different again. We will develop new vocabularies for these different felt times, new philosophies, new cultural practices that fit the new rhythms. The diversity of human temporal experience will grow. The Earth-based experience will become one entry in a larger collection. And we will have to grapple, more directly than we do now, with the question of what time really is, beyond the felt experience of any particular place. The deepest lesson, I think, is that the felt realness of time is a relationship. It is a relationship between consciousness and environment, between biology and planet, between mind and world. The realness emerges from the relationship. It is not a property of either side alone. Without a planet to provide rhythms, there would be no temporal experience. Without consciousness to integrate the rhythms, there would be no felt time. Both are needed. And the specific character of the felt time depends on the specific character of both sides. When you next look up at the night sky and see other stars, other planets, other possible worlds, I want you to remember that each of those places, if it had conscious life, would produce its own felt time. Each would have its own temporal phenomenology, its own rhythms, its own way of making time feel real to its inhabitants. The cosmos is, in this sense, a place where many kinds of felt time are possible, where each conscious system experiences time in a way shaped by its local conditions. The variety is, in principle, vast. The universe is not just spatially diverse. It is temporally diverse in the felt sense, with each pocket of consciousness experiencing time differently. And yet, here on Earth, we have ours. We have this particular felt time, shaped by this particular planet, produced by the unique alignment of conditions that has held for billions of years. The day cycles. The seasons change. The tides come in and go out. The biology tracks the rhythms. The brain integrates the rhythms into experience. The result is the felt sense of time that you are having right now, as you read or listen to these words. This sense is yours. It is local to where you are. It is the result of an extraordinary chain of cosmic and biological accidents that have produced, here, this particular kind of temporal experience. There is something almost sacred about this, when you sit with it long enough. Not in any religious sense, but in the sense of recognizing how rare and how specific the conditions are that produce the experience you are having. Most of the universe does not feel time this way. Even within the small parts of the universe where consciousness might exist, most do not feel it this way. You are having an experience that is, in some real sense, an Earth-only experience. Not because Earth is metaphysically privileged, but because this specific kind of felt time depends on this specific set of conditions, and those conditions exist, fully, only here. When you finally turn off this video and step outside and look up at the sky, I want you to feel the time in your own experience. Feel the present moment. Feel the day unfolding. Feel the season. Feel the year. And remember that all of this entire texture of temporal experience, is shaped by the planet you are standing on. The rotation that gives you your day. The tilt that gives you your seasons. The moon that gives you your tides. The biology that has evolved over billions of years to track these rhythms. The culture that has organized them into shared temporal life. All of it, working together, to produce the felt sense of time that you are having right now. Time feels real on Earth because Earth has spent billions of years making it feel that way. Through every star that exploded to scatter the elements, through every collision that built this planet, through every rotation that has spun this world, through every season that has cycled through every generation of life that has tracked the rhythms, through every moment of human history that has structured the collective experience, the conditions have been built up that allow you, right now, to feel time as something flowing, real, present. This feeling is the inheritance of all of that history. It is a gift, in a sense, from the universe to you, made possible by the specific conditions of the place where you happen to live. That is the answer to the question. Time feels real on Earth because Earth is, as far as we know, the only place where exactly these conditions have been brought together for exactly long enough to produce exactly this kind of temporal experience. Other worlds might have other felt times, no less real to their inhabitants. But the specific realness you feel, the specific texture of the present moment, the specific flow of duration that runs through your conscious experience, this belongs to Earth. It is the felt time of being alive on this particular planet. And once you have understood that, the experience itself takes on a different quality. It becomes not just something you have, but something you are. A conscious being, here, now, integrated into the rhythms of a world that has been preparing this experience for as long as the universe itself has existed. The realness of time, in this sense, is not a fact about reality. It is a fact about being you, here, now, on this strange and extraordinary planet that has, against all cosmic odds, produced exactly the conditions that make time feel exactly as real as it does. That is what Earth has given you. That is what the universe has, through this one specific place, made possible. And once you have heard this, you cannot quite experience time the same way again. Because every moment now carries with it the awareness that this feeling is not just yours. It is Earth's. It is the planet's slow patient gift, billions of years in the making, given to every conscious being it has produced. The felt realness of time is the planet speaking through you, in the only language consciousness can understand. And as long as you are here, the speaking continues, moment by moment, day by day, season by season, in the strange and beautiful music of being alive on a world that has, somehow, made time feel as real as it does.